Every election has its own rhythm. What issues matter? Who gets traction? What does and doesn't end up defining the race? Jeffrey Simpson has watched politicians campaign from coast to coast to coast for more than 4 decades. The Governor General's award-winning author and former national affairs columnist with the Globe and Mail is now a fellow at the University of Ottawa, and he joins us in our studio for a change for a long view of this, his 14th federal election. Can that be true?
I have been running in 14 times.
You haven't been running in them, but you've been watching them, and we're really glad to have you in that chair.
My pleasure, as always.
Let me read a few things that have been said by people that you know about this campaign and then get you to weigh in. David Hurley called it the Seinfeld election, meaning it's about nothing. Andrew Coyne described it as the most miserable, dishonest, venomous, pandering, and altogether trivial exercise in multi-partisan misdirection since the last one. Paul Wells wrote, "Surely this can't be an actual national election campaign in a serious country in dangerous times." Okay, that's all out there. What do you say?
Andrew Coyne, the master of the understatement. So let me turn that on its head, okay? Even if I agreed with all of that, it could be worse. Look at the United States.
We don't have the freak show.
Look at the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
Okay? So you can call this election vapid, and I would. You can call it full of delusions, and we can get to that if you like. Call it many things, but it is not existential, as in the United Kingdom, led by somebody who literally has misled the British people continuously.
And apparently the Queen.
And the President of the United States, enough said. So, yes, I don't disagree with a lot of that.
Delusional? Delusional in
Well, what I
respect?
mean is that a number of the promises that are being made by all political parties are completely unrealizable or would not be wise to do. So let's take, for example, climate change, which has been very actively discussed in the campaign. And I did a book on this some years ago with Mark Jacquard from Simon Fraser.
On this program to do it, yes.
I know a little bit about it. The notion that you could cut the output of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada by 60%, as the Greens want, in 10 years, is literally delusional. Okay? Cannot be done short of shutting down most of the Canadian economy. The NDP is not far behind. Mr. Trudeau says we'll be carbon neutral by 2050. Now, when any political actor in the year of our Lord 2019 says something will happen in 2050, they won't be around, either in politics or on this earth. So nothing they say in that regard should be taken seriously. Mr. Scheer, for his part, has nothing credible to say on climate change. So on that issue, you've got some parties that are actually putting out ambitious targets that cannot possibly be realized.
Well, what if we don't call them delusional? What if we call them aspirational? Does that make it any better?
Well, it sounds better, but they are delusional in the sense that they cannot be achieved. So you can call it aspirational or delusional, whatever you want. And I just mentioned Mr. Trudeau. But that's just one policy. The other thing that really strikes me just on this campaign, a lot of campaigns are about the country's fiscal situation. In this campaign, all of the parties, to hell with the deficit, to hell with our fiscal policy. And the other thing is, so the modern economy, the so-called fourth revolution, is about the digital economy, it's about artificial intelligence, it's about science, it's about technology, it's about innovation. Those words, it's as if they're verboten. So trying to create wealth in this country, greater wealth, which we can then redistribute, that half of the equation doesn't appear. It's all about redistributing existing wealth rather than building new.
It was 20, 25 years ago when Paul Martin did say, come hell or high water, we're going to balance the budget in this country.
And he did.
And he did. And since then, I guess we learned that deficits don't matter anymore, right?
So I think, Steve, in the great sweep of history, to sound a bit pretentious, these things go in waves, okay? We had many years of deficits. The deficits piled up, and what did governments do? Mr. Mulroney raised taxes and cut spending, which is the classic thing to do. People over time began to say, what's going on? Why are my taxes going up? Why are services being reduced? Oh, it's because of interest payments on the debt, which got to be very high. So there was a receptivity to a message that we got to do something about that. And Mr. Chrétien, who was a kind of reassuring figure, he, remember, campaigned not on eliminating the deficit, but on bringing it down to 3% of GDP. At any rate, they did it. And for many years thereafter, it was an article of faith that Canadians wanted their politicians, provincial and federal, to balance the budget.
No more.
I think 2008 had something to do with that, okay? After 2008 financial meltdown, even Stephen Harper had to pour money into the economy, right, to try to
Biggest
provide
deficit ever.
Yeah, the biggest.
$55 billion.
Right, Keynesian response to a terrible downturn. And after that, one became a bit habituated to having these deficits. So this will go on for a period of time, and then there will be an economic downturn, and the deficits will swell enormously, well beyond what they're promising now. And when I say delusional, by the way, I don't want to harp too much on the Greens, but I was reading the Green platform in detail. Elizabeth May, in year one, wants to increase the deficit by $74 billion. 74 billion, not 7.4, 74 billion.
But to invest in green tech and you know.
No, lots of other things.
Decarbonizing
No. Yes, but eliminate university fees, have pharmacare and denticare, have universal child care. I mean, you know, this, okay, and where are you going to pay for it?
Aspirational.
You use whatever word you want.
Okay. Moving on here, I want to read something from a speech you gave at the University of Saskatchewan last year, talking about the issue of leadership and Canada's role in the world. And Sheldon, would you bring this graphic up, please, and we'll all read along together. Canadians have a misguided view of the world and the country's place in it. A slogan in Chapter's Indigo stores proclaims that, quote, the world needs more Canada. It sounds so enticing and morally uplifting, but the statement is false. It is instead a self-comforting myth that Canadians need to shed but cannot. Ingrained in Canada is the misguided idea that the world loves and respects us and will wait on Canada while we figure out what is best for us before deciding what is best for the world. We also believe all evidence to the contrary that the world enjoys the moral lectures we deliver. Okay.
Oh, wonderfully written.
I've got to say, it's very well written. Of the two prospective prime ministerial candidates in this race, in your view, who's got the right temperament for the times?
Well, let's go back to Mr. Trudeau, okay? He said, remember famously, that this is a government that likes aphorisms, you know? Canada's back.
Yes.
Oh, Canada's back. What does that mean? Well, we're back. Well, okay, so are you going to have more money for foreign aid? No.
Not necessarily.
Are you going to expand your diplomatic service? No. Are you going to jack up substantially your defense spending? No.
We're going to go for a seat on the UN Security Council.
Yeah, now I'm coming to that point. So Canada's back, but you haven't actually put any cards on the table, but you say you're back, okay? And then you continue to give very moralistic speeches, and you have a feminist foreign policy, okay? Gender-based. That goes over like the proverbial lead balloon in many parts of the UN. Do you think in the Arab world that's a vote getter? Not really. Do you think it's very popular in China? We tried to get gender as part of our trade agreement with China, and we put gender on the table in the NAFTA negotiations, and the Americans said, excuse me, you're not listening to us. You're not seriously understanding why we want these negotiations to start. So this is pretense. So there's all kinds of, we're not going to win the seat on the Security Council. Forget that. And we certainly won't if Andrew Scheer wins. But these countries are looking and saying, here comes this country that's going to lecture us over and over again without actually delivering any real stuff. That's what I meant by, you know, if we were, and by the way, the single worst, you asked me for my historical perspective, the single worst promise I've ever heard, the most injurious promise I've ever heard is Andrew Scheer's promise to cut foreign aid by 25%. We are already near the bottom of the world's richest countries in the share of our economy we give to foreign aid. He wants to cut that by a quarter. He says it's to stop us having our money go to thug regimes. Well, it doesn't actually, but even if any of it did, you could just transfer it to some other program.
Isn't that more about repatriating the People's Party vote that he's worried about losing?
That's politics, but I'm talking about the impact if it ever happened on our foreign policy. You'd go to the UN, you'd go to international agencies. Here come the moral Canadians. Oh, you just dropped it by 25% the money you're giving to the world's poorest people? Excuse me, save us your lectures.
As long as we're doing historical lookbacks, I want to take you back to the first campaign you ever covered, which if I...
That was in 18...
No, it wasn't that long ago.
Wasn't that Mackenzie Bull?
I'm pretty sure you didn't cover that one, but I'm pretty sure you did cover the 74 campaign, which was, I guess, the third one for Pierre Trudeau. He had barely squeaked by with a minority 2 years earlier. 74, he wins a majority over Robert Stanfield. David Lewis is there, I guess, for the NDP. Mm-hmm. Rael Coët, I guess, is there for the Creditistes.
Yes,
got a few seats in Quebec.
I had just worked for the Social Credit.
What?
I was a parliamentary intern, so you had to work for different
Oh,
parties, and I
see.
spent 3 months working for the
No
Crédit
kidding.
Social.
I never knew that. Well, tell us in your view how the differences in our political culture today versus, what is that, 45 years ago when you covered your first campaign.
So this campaign reminds me a little of that campaign in the following way. I think this is a very retro campaign in the sense that a lot of the things parties are saying are actually backward-looking, recycled. So in that campaign, I was on what was called Bum Air. Bum Air was the NDP plane, nicknamed by the press, because the theme of their campaign was corporate welfare bums, okay? Corporations are ripping us off. They've got all these tax loopholes. And as I was listening to the NDP leader the other night, I said, I heard that in 1974. So there's no difference there.
Well, and we got a Trudeau on as the Liberal leader again, too.
We got Trudeau
Talk
as
about
the
retro.
leaders. But in 1974, we were entering into a long period of concern about Quebec's place in Canada, okay? Because the Parti Québécois had, in 1973, elected its first MPs. And this was a tremendous shock to the system in Ottawa, René Lévesque and so on. And so that was the beginning of what I would call, to use today's phrase, identity politics. What would be the identity of French Canadians within Canada? And what would Canada's identity become to try to deal with, to use your word, the aspirations of French Canadians? And that issue, which was just starting right there, and Trudeau was seen as better placed to deal with it than Bob Stanfield, who was a very decent man, by the way, that issue dominated Canadian affairs for the better part of a quarter of a century thereafter. So that was the start. Now identity politics is much, much less about that. In fact, it's really not that at all, although Quebec's role in Canada Quebec being a distinct society will always be part of Canada. Now it's about gender, it's about Indigenous people, it's about multiculturals, it's about gays.
Wearing a hijab or a turban.
Yeah, so these are the issues of the identity of Canada, or identities, that simply weren't around in those days. Maybe they should have been, but they weren't. And that is the profound difference, I think, between the politics of then, which is who's best placed not just to run the economy and all those basic things, but to deal with this emerging question of Quebec and Canada, as opposed to today, where we rather think that's been settled, and now it's all kinds of groups seeking their identity to be affirmed in the form of policies directed towards them.
Let's do another compare and contrast. The Liberal Party of 45 years ago of Pierre Trudeau's versus
Hugely different.
Justin Trudeau's
Hugely
today.
different.
How so?
When I got to Ottawa as an intern and then as a journalist in 76, 77, the Liberal Party, which had been called the governing party, right, was a party that had a, what you might call, socially activist wing, and it would have Herb Gray, and it would have Alan J. McKechnie, and it would have those kind of people, and some of the French Canadians who came in with Trudeau. But it also had what I would call business-oriented liberals. I mean, at the beginning, there was Bob Winters, there was Ed Lumley, I worked for Barney Danson from Toronto, Alistair Gillespie
Leo
from Toronto.
Colbert in the Senate.
Yeah, but I mean, in the cabinet, around the table, and then later on there would be Lloyd Axworthy, but there would be John Manley. So there was the business wing of the party, and there would be the socially active wing, Monique Béjean, the socially active wing. And Trudeau, was kind of playing referee here on economic questions. And remember when Trudeau came back from the Bonn Summit in 1978, without consulting Jean Chrétien, who was his finance minister, he announced on television, I remember getting the call from PMO, he's asked for television time, to announce a $2 billion cut in the federal budget because the deficit was too high. So that was the balance of the Liberal Party. That's completely gone. The business liberals do not exist anymore, save and except maybe for Bill Morneau. And the cabinet is made up, therefore, of people who are on the social activist, if I can put it that way, side of the ledger. And I also think that cabinets have become weaker over time. I mean, Trudeau, of course, dominated his cabinet, but he listened to different points of view, and he would actually give to senior ministers a fair bit of discretion in areas that he didn't care about. So I remember after one election, he didn't want Jean-Luc Pépin anywhere near the Constitution. They didn't agree, so he made him Minister of Transport, and he reformed the Crow's Nest pass rate. Amazing achievement. But Justin Trudeau doesn't seem to spend a lot of time with his ministers, and the government really does seem more or less to be run, or used to be run, by Jerry Butts and Katie Telford. And PMO's always been important in any government of Canada, but it seems to be even more centralized now than it was when I wrote a book called The Friendly Dictatorship about how centralized it was. And if I had to rewrite the book, I'd probably say, well, in the pantheon of things, Jean Chrétien wasn't as centralizing as I thought he was.
I know you can recall times when, for example, Bill Davis campaigned for Brian Mulroney, or even more recently, Kathleen Wynne campaigned for Justin Trudeau. Can you recall a campaign where the Premier of Ontario was so detached and so absent in any way with his federal leader? And of course, I'm talking about Doug Ford with Andrew Scheer.
Well, that's easily explained. He's extremely unpopular, and he doesn't want to provide an easy target for the federal Liberals. That's perfectly straightforward. Bill Davis was a very popular premier for most of the many years he was premier. So having him campaign for the national Conservative leader made some sense in his own province. But having Doug Ford campaign for Andrew Scheer would make no sense whatsoever. I mean, the hardcore Conservatives are going to vote for Andrew Scheer anyway. It's the other people that Doug Ford has alienated outside the Conservative core that the Liberals are hoping to feast on.
Do you do social media at all? Twitter, Facebook, any of that stuff?
No.
So you are not privy to much of the rancor that is out there that, again, would be very different from when you first started covering.
That is a huge difference. You asked about the difference with Trudeau Sr. None of that existed.
In which case, does it feel as if do we have a false sense of how polarized this country is today versus 45 years ago because of social media?
Well, since I don't pay any attention to it, I can't tell. I don't. Is the country polarized? It's polarized regionally at the moment in a way that I think is a little dangerous, because during Mr. Trudeau's first term, it could be fairly said that they had seats in every province, including 4 in Alberta. And the Quebec situation had resolved itself. So they were a national government. Obviously, they were stronger in some places than others. But what's now happening is you've got this anger in Alberta that I understand, although I think it's partly misdirected. And it's directed at Quebec, largely, regionally. And Quebec is being a bit defensive about the way they feel. And so the next government, it's either going to be conservative with not much strength in Quebec, or it's going to be liberal with no strength in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And that's going to make governing the Federation more difficult.
Yeah. We do need to talk about one of the biggest issues in the campaign, and that is the federal party's response to this Bill 21 in Quebec. Very popular bill in Quebec, you know, the one that prohibits people from working in the public service if they have a hijab or a yarmulke or a turban, as Jagmeet Singh does. My question is, should we in English Canada be more sympathetic to Quebec's distinctiveness on this, given that they are a distinct society?
It's something for them to decide. I mean, we're not going around, we're in a studio in Toronto, we're not sending our kids to school in Montreal or Trois-Rivières. That's something for them to decide. And ultimately, we'll go to the courts to decide whether, under the Quebec Bill of Rights and the Canadian Charter of Rights, it offends those basic principles. And we'll see what the courts have to say. Although the government of Quebec has already said it's going to use the notwithstanding clause.
Precisely.
So we'll see how that plays out.
It did come up in the English language leaders debate,
it did.
in as much as it looked almost as if the federal leaders were tripping over themselves to say, we're really upset about this and we intend to do absolutely nothing about it.
The question is, what could they do?
Well, they could
intervene in the court case.
They could intervene in the court case right now.
Sure.
And Justin Trudeau was sort of beating his chest saying, I'm the only leader up here who's been prepared to say, I'm leaving open the possibility of somewhere down the road possibly intervening. Okay. I mean, that's hardly
well, they know, first of all, that the
barricades.
bill is popular, so there's a political risk in doing it.
Right.
Secondly, even if the federal government or party were to intervene in the court case, it wouldn't be a determinant factor. It would be a factor a court would determine. And then the Quebec government has already said it's going to exercise the notwithstanding clause. So getting rid of this measure is going to be extremely difficult. And therefore, I think the parties have sort of said the game isn't worth the candle, although it sounds good to say that it is.
But as the current prime minister is the son of the guy who brought in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Does he look bad on this by taking that position?
Well, he doesn't look, I don't know, I don't think in the rest of the country people care much what goes on in the province of Quebec. A few civil libertarians probably do, and in the province of Quebec, the legislation is popular. This government in Quebec is a fascinating, it's a retro government. It's like the old Union Nationale, go way back in time. a nationalist, defensive Quebec government, not a separatist government. They're going to be managerial, not aspirational. Is that your word? And they're going to stand up for Quebec's interests, and they're going to be quite nationalist about it. And this piece of legislation is that. Somebody once said, and I think there's some truth to it in a way that in English Canada, not so much, all politics in Quebec to some extent is around the national question. And this issue of wearing religious symbols has been roiling Quebec because of that issue for quite some time, in a way that in a more multicultural place like the rest of the country, it wouldn't come up. I say one other thing, and now I'm into philosophy, right? Quebec is the Civil Law Society, and it is Cartesian, which means that they like to debate things on the basis of first principles. So when they first got into this identity debate over symbols and so on, what did they do? They set up a two-person commission that went around the province and they wrote a long report under Monsieur Bouchard and Charles Taylor, eminent philosopher, going into the philosophy of all of this and the first principles of all of this, and things would flow from that. Our tradition in the mixed up common law is to kind of case by case try to stumble through to some compromise and move forward. We would I don't think a Premier of Ontario would set up such a commission and say, let's get to the first principles of all of this. Little dangerous. We don't want to do that. So it's a different style of approaching these kinds of existential questions, and we like to kind of stay away from them, and they almost like to wallow in them.
A couple of minutes to go here, and I do want to ask you what impact you think Maxime Bernier has had in this campaign with his new People's Party.
Zero.
Really?
Well, he's got 1% of the vote.
Has he put immigration and refugee issues, for example?
Well, he's put them on the table, but nobody's paying any attention. I mean, that I can see. And in fact, David Johnston, in my opinion, I like David, made a terrible mistake in allowing him in the debates. What he did was he went to some riding where he thought they had some strength. They showed up with 3 or 5% of the vote. And he said, oh, he should be allowed the same exposure with his 1% of the party as the Prime Minister and Mr. Scheer. I mean, this is bizarre. It was part of the bordello that the debate became.
The what? Is that a technical term? Having said that, he did have his moment in the sun, several moments in the sun at the leaders' debate, and appears not to have moved his numbers very much at all.
Why are you surprised?
It's not a matter of surprise or not, but I wonder.
They have no organization on the ground. He's not well known outside Quebec. In Quebec, he's a highly controversial figure. They hate him in rural Quebec because he wants to abolish supply management. So come
Doesn't
on,
believe
give me
in
a break.
climate change.
Doesn't believe in climate change.
You don't think there's a constituency that bigger than 1% for those views in the country?
Well, I haven't seen it yet. I mean, maybe there is, but at the moment they haven't flocked to him. That's the least you can say. And many of them may be making a kind of implicit political calculus that why waste my vote on him, because it'll be a vote that will not go to the Conservatives, and that'll allow the devil incarnate, Mr. Trudeau, back into office. So maybe the people on the right wing are sort of doing something strategically smart. Why waste their vote?
I'm not much on predictions on this program. We almost never ask people their predictions.
I never predict elections, so don't ask me.
Okay, well, that actually was going to be my last question.
No, because everything we know about voting behavior suggests that a large number of people who are undecided don't even think about the election campaign until maybe this weekend at Thanksgiving. The fact that they think about it and talk about it with their family and friends doesn't mean they've decided. Many of them will go into the last week of the campaign and they still won't have decided. And they'll pick up little fragments off television and they'll hear from their neighbors about this and that. And many of them go to the ballot box and they haven't really decided until the day of the vote what they're going to do. So last election, you could see it. A whole lot of people made up their minds in the last few days to vote Liberal, okay? And so they got their majority. I don't know what those people are going to do this time.
So the story is not baked in just yet, because everybody seems to think it's a tie right now and with very little volatility at all. We shouldn't assume that.
Well, I don't think there's going to be a 10-point surge, let's put it that way, because clearly Mr. Trudeau caught a wave of a desire for change, which they articulated well. It looked like Tom Mulcair had that wave going for him, and Mr. Trudeau took it over. And the other thing is, there's a certain amount of, not a lot, but tactical voting that goes on at the end. So the Greens are showing it 8, 10%, something like that. Some Greens will have to ask themselves, you know, I believe in Elizabeth May. I like this platform. It's aspirational, to use your word.
I'm never going to hear the end of that,
No,
am I?
you're not. You're not. So let's vote. Let's vote our hearts. And some of them might say, well, you know, of course I want to vote Green, but my vote, my second choice would be the Liberals. And if I don't vote for them, it's more likely that the bad old Conservatives who don't have a serious climate change program, which is the most important issue for me, will get into office. So I got to hold my nose and plug my ears and vote Liberal to stop him from becoming Prime Minister. So there'll be some, right at the end of the day, people who, and depending on the riding they're in, will say, you know, my candidate in this riding as a Green just doesn't have a chance. And so, much as I'd like to vote for good old Steve over there, the Green person, I better vote for Sally because she's a Liberal, and a vote for them will make it more likely that Mr. Scheer won't be PM. Some of that will happen at the very end.
You know, we always enjoy having you on this program, but I got to say how much more fun it is when I can actually see you 3 feet away from me as opposed to on a satellite feed. So
That's very nice of you.
Come to Toronto more often, will
and
you?
we'll talk hockey.
You're on. You're on. That's Jeffrey Simpson, the former national affairs columnist with the Globe and Mail, now a fellow at the University of Ottawa. Great to see you.
Thank you, Steve, very much.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.